how to quantitatively measure brand awareness, the importance of seeking quality over quantity, and the power of avoiding soulless marketing. That and more on this episode of Advertising Influencers.
Advertising Influencers. Conversations with today's top-tier marketers from Silicon Valley and beyond. Powered by Instapage, the most powerful landing page solution.
Hello. Hope you're doing very well whenever and wherever you are listening. My name is Ander, marketing educator here at Instapage, and welcome to this episode of our flagship podcast, Advertising Influencers, where we speak with the best and brightest minds in the digital marketing and advertising spaces today. Certainly talked to one of those people last week, Stephen McKee, who is the head of product and growth over at Purse.io. We had a fascinating conversation on blockchain technologies and how they're becoming increasingly more relevant in digital advertising. Check that episode out when you have a chance, but first stick around for this one because we are talking to an absolute rock star today. His name is Sean Zinsmeister, and he's the VP of Product Marketing at Infer, a predictive analytics and AI platform for enterprise companies. He's a full-stack marketer, and he's very well-versed in channels across the entire funnel. He's also the host of another podcast called Stack and Flow, a podcast featuring news, interviews, and discussions on sales and marketing automation. He's also very, very articulate, which you'll see very shortly. Really excited to share this conversation with you. So, without further ado, let's go down to his office in Mountain View and go say hello. One of the things I like about doing these podcasts here at Instapage and on Advertising Influencers is I get to get out of the office. I get to go somewhere new and fresh within the Bay Area. And here I am today in Infer HQ, I believe, here in Mountain View with Sean Zinsmeister. Sean, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And what exactly do you do here at Infer?
So I'm the head of product marketing. So I'm in charge of anything around our go-to-market strategy, messaging, and content creation, and sort of all things involved with how we sort of bring our products to market.
Awesome. And I explained a little bit about it in the introduction, but how would you describe Infer?
That's a good question. So we are a predictive analytics and artificial intelligence company, and we help sales and marketing teams focus on their best opportunities. So we help salespeople understand better who to sell to. We help marketing teams know who they should actually be sort of sending their campaigns and focusing their marketing spend on.
Yeah, and you guys have a lot of integrations, Eloqua, Marketo, HubSpot, all those other SaaS products.
Yeah. We like to think of it as sort of a fabric solution. So we want to make sure that it's sort of AI everywhere to make sure that it's not just trapped within an application that you're with. It's like we want to be able to actually share that intelligence across your entire stack. And that's kind of been we call it an open architecture approach to building product.
Ooh, I like that messaging quite a lot. We also, that's a big thing that's important to us, is integrate within your workflow, whatever it is, whatever your stack is. And what is an example of a use case someone might use Infer for? And it would be awesome to hear that in the context of advertising if you have one.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple. So at the basics, I think it's important to sort of zoom out and understand like why the technology is even useful in the first place. Like, what are we doing here? And I like to call it is that we're really in the midst of a data storm right now. There's so much data. And there's one thing that marketing and sales teams are really good at doing, which is collecting more and more data. And so in order
for better or for worse.
Exactly. And really, like, what it comes down to is to be able to actually sift through this data and actually derive sort of meaningful conclusions from anything, to be able to drive action, like actionable intelligence, as the military might say. It's very difficult to throw enough humans at these problems to do this at scale. So one of the primary functions of our application is filtering. So being able to take, all of the noise out. So we have a lot of spam algorithms that we use. We're doing things like if you're detecting keyboard strokes to understand, like, is this a legitimate form input and things like that. So you're really detecting patterns and things across like how users use the keyboard, doing different things on natural language processing to understand, like, is this bunk or is this a good prospect, essentially. And that's first, because if you think about it, at the heart of it, it's really expensive to hold a lot of data. The more data that you push through your stack, the more inefficient that it gets. And so if you're just talking about sort of, it's like putting oil in your car. You want to make sure that things are running efficiently. So that's kind of like the infrastructure piece behind it. That filtering mechanism is really, really important. I would say that that's probably important to understand. That's the no-touch application of artificial intelligence. One of the dirty secrets that marketers like to sort of hold to their chest is the incredible amount of waste that they generate with their programs. Programs that don't generate quality prospects and that don't lead to opportunity gains. But also the feedback mechanism in the past has been very, very slow. And that's really important to understand. So if we run an advertising campaign probably 10 years ago, we would have to wait for the entire life cycle of the campaign to complete to understand, what falls out the bottom. We're looking at like the furthest downstream metrics, which might be revenue, right? Like closed won revenue and things like that.
And just for some context, 10 years ago, Facebook didn't have an advertising platform.
Yeah.
As far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that a lot of this stuff, the way that I look at it is like marketing automation. If you look at the full timeline of things, right? And I was looking at this yesterday. In the 90s was really about all email marketing became the craze, right? It was all about direct marketing, sort of moving from offline sort of direct mail to now like email marketing and a lot of applying those things. In the 2000s, when we first started to see the birth of these early marketing automation platforms, social media then started to take on in the next few years coming in the 2000s, mobile then started to take on. And I think that now we're in this sort of next revolution around AI and predictive analytics and things like that. But even for a lot of these advertising programs, and we can get really deep into this stuff too, because
sure.
I mean, if you're talking just about brand advertising, like let's go beyond Facebook for just a second. Because I actually think that what's interesting about things like Facebook is that those platforms are relatively advanced. Like there's a lot of intelligence involved with how they're targeting already, right? Like,
AdWords as well.
AdWords as well. Things. Like, Google is a huge AI domain and they're doing a lot of incredible stuff, behind the scenes. Where, lending a technology like ours would add optimization, but there's already a lot of good stuff going. Same with things like AdRoll and advanced programs like that. But one of the things that's like really exciting is to kind of like look beyond just the digital advertising and look at things like how we're applying AI to things like visual recognition, right? Like logo recognition. Mm-hmm. So if you think about being able to train these intelligent models with understanding, can we know like when our brand shows up with people posting thousands of things in Instagram or, showing up on just, what we like to think is like static image, but now we're like sort of being able to pluck data from it, understand patterns and understand like where's our brand showing up. Now you're starting to be like, wow, like now we can start to apply AI to understanding, brand advertising used to just sort of be like feel good marketing, but now we can like really start to sort of generate some measurable results from it. So that's a really exciting use case to sort of like look into the future to understand like branding used to be this sort of the softer, more intangible part of marketing. Mm-hmm. It always kind of worked, but we were sort of trusting this like halo effect for it to
we get lift.
Yeah, we get lift somewhere, don't know where, could be nowhere. And the truth is it's usually an orchestration of a lot of different things. I think that's the other thing that a lot of marketers forget too, is that the reason that if you've been to any sort of business school 101 marketing class, the reason that they teach you about the marketing mix is that it is a mix. Your approach should be a diversified portfolio, to borrow from the financial insecurities. It's like you're going to have some high risk, high reward programs. You're going to have some sort of, bonds programs that are just like steady wins the race. Maybe those for you are like AdWords and Facebook, right? Traditional advertising that we're going to get a decent amount of performance marketing and it's just going to be steady and fairly predictable about how we're getting that back. There might be programs that you go along with, like maybe that's your big media spend, your TV buys and things like that. But, pushing them all together, that's where you sort of get that power of that marketing mix. And I think that that's something else that people are starting to realize. And as they sort of now start to apply AI, they can now start to sort of intelligently analyze their marketing portfolios to figure out, okay, what's working, what's not. Let me double my efforts on this program, dump this one, and now I have a better opportunity to sort of reap the rewards of the money that I'm spending, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, obviously, AdWords, Facebook, Quantcast, AdRoll, all these platforms have fairly intense and powerful analytics that are built in. But there's a lot of synthesis of the data that needs to be done after that data has been acquired. You might need a business intelligence person to do something like that. And especially when you have something as qualitative as identifying how often your brand is showing up on social media.
It's not even like what happens with the data after, but some people forget that actually the hardest job that we do today when it comes to AI and building predictive models is the data preparation part. Everybody's data, no matter what business that we work with, like the amount of data cleanup that you need to actually build a coherent model, a good model, one that's going to be highly predictable. There's missing data, there's things that have been entered wrong. I mean, if you think about the amount and, especially if you're an organization that lacks what I call governance, right? Where you have frontline salespeople sort of, doing data entry and like the amount of percentage of mistakes that you can calculate just from that, or things that are missing because, you don't have conditional logic set up in your Salesforce, whatever your CRM is, to say, hey, you can't like move on to the next step without answering this question. Mm-hmm. Or, you get silliness like at my past company where, they're asking for title. And when they went back and did the analysis, they actually figured out that the number one title was Mr. and Mrs. because it wasn't job title. And so naturally the user was like, oh, what's my title? And like most people were just already adding that. And like the lack of the word job title as that label for that field as an input form just led to all this, data corruption that had to be go back and cleaned up. And that's a really, really big problem that I think, we're going to start to get more intelligent by leveraging technology to clean it up. But a lot of this stuff has to be done by hand. There is infrastructure that kind of helps automate it, but the amount of data preparation to even like get to that point, people are familiar with the garbage in, garbage out type of formula, and that doesn't stop like as soon as you like run the program. Like that's kind of an ongoing process. And I think that if you looked at where marketing operations professionals spend the majority of their time, cleaning up, organizing, segmenting, purging data is a really, really heavy task. And it doesn't stop once you launch the program.
No, certainly not. I really like that example of title versus job title and how important that is in qualifying a lead or making sure you've got all your information in your CRM, whatever it might be. What are some other examples, maybe observations you've seen from customers here at Infer or elsewhere?
Sure. I think the most popular observation is a lot of people have been getting into technographics. We actually wrote a piece that's published in VentureBeat, one of the first to sort of pioneer the use of that work, because people are familiar with firmographics and demographics, right? And these are how you sort of make up criteria of a profile when I'm trying to build that persona, our ideal customer, if you will. And it's now starting to understand, it's like, well, what can we understand about you as a buyer given the technology that you use? And by the way, I don't actually think that this is siloed to just the B2B customer. I think this is actually something really exciting where now we can start to bring in, it's like this buzzword soup, right? The Internet of Things, right? Where we have connected devices, what applications are you using on your iPhone or your Android phone or your Fitbit watch or smartwatch and these types of things. Like
your smart shoes and jacket probably coming soon. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean,
all that data.
And it was a mentor of mine that mentioned to me, it's like we create so much data exhaust wherever we go, right? We're walking around, we're exhibiting a GPS signal that follows us everywhere if you have tracking on. I mean, we're generating like so much data just by like walking around, and it's like your phone's counting your steps and all this stuff. So, I mean, like the amount we can actually understand about the different technologies and how to understand our profile from that has been a really exciting sort of advance in targeting, and especially for things like advertising. A very simple example is like, you have a Salesforce application that you want to be able to identify who's using the Salesforce CRM, okay? Well, okay, so there's ways that you can detect that by crawling the web, but there's also sort of behind the firewall data that you can obtain from third parties. You build that list, you put together your advertising program, and it's very, very targeted. And that's a very simple one-to-one. We have this product, it fits this profile given this technology. Now, does it matter what that title of that person is? I mean, it should, because it's going to create like more, personalized message, if you will. And personalization is something that I think a lot of marketers get confused about. I
completely agree.
It's really more about like, is this relevant? Is it relevant to you? I mean, it's more like just like if you just purchased, said product on Amazon and then you're on Facebook and you see an advertisement for the exact product that you just bought, that's not very relevant to you. You're like, where was this like, an hour ago, or like when you were during the time of purchase? The timing mechanism, I think, is still something that a lot of these systems are struggling with today. Because I mean, Amazon's pretty darn advanced and has an incredible amount of data, and even they're not sort of picture perfect when they're sort of following the customer journey, as it will. But I do think that technographics and what your technology profile is incredibly powerful stuff. And I think it's a new way that marketers are starting to examine how they do segmentation without sort of getting like too granular, right? Like being able to take those traits and, you take that and then you add, I think the other exciting sort of trend is how we're starting to analyze engagement and behavioral analytics. What's going on? How are people interacting with your content, with your website, with your things? And like, what kind of signals can we protrude from here to make sure that we're delivering our messages at the right time, right? Especially when you're talking about assets that you own, those signals can be highly predictive. There's another sort of new trend that I think is an exciting frontier, although I think that it's early days, which is third-party intent data as well. So it's like, okay, it's not just about what you're doing on my websites and the things that I own, my owned, media sites, if it were, but what's going on these third-party publisher sites? Like, what are people researching about, this topic that I care about, and like, how do I target those people? And you can see how that could be very attractive for a marketer to be like, well, geez, if I'm selling big turbines or I'm selling, cybersecurity or something, very popular obviously right now in the news, incredible, but I want to know what accounts that I should be looking at for people who are actively researching that. Now, I would argue there's an incredible amount of false positives, around that. Like, there's not enough coverage of those signals for it to be predictable. Coverage meaning there just aren't enough of them. You can't like just draw conclusions based upon these like, sort of single data points that are out there. But it does give some interesting insight for the marketer that they didn't have before. It might be a pen light in a dark cave, as it were, but it still is something, and I think that light is going to get brighter and brighter. Although, as we do that, I think the conversation, the dialogue around data and privacy is going to continue to prevail. I think that we are very, very liberal when it comes to this conversation, especially here in the United States. And if you look at what some of our allies like Germany and Canada have started to really crack down on. I mean, even if you look at to send unsolicited emails to somebody, which like we sort of think is like, yeah, it's commonplace. Right. It doesn't matter. Everybody's on a list somewhere. You can be sued in some of the European Union, which is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to see where that conversation ebbs and flows and how willing people are to just give up their data.
I had a really interesting conversation with Tyson Quick, who's the CEO of Instapage, and it was actually the very first episode of this podcast. And we talked about how a lot of people, they see this data collection, they see this really hyper-focused targeting of ads to them as possibly a little bit creepy, personally identifying information and all that stuff like that. I think there's an argument to be made, and I'm not 100% sure how much I agree with this, although I do see the merit in this argument. I think there is an argument to be made that some people might actually choose to provide more personal information if they are truly getting targeted with things that are of real value to them. I mean, I think one of the reasons that people don't like that information being out there is the stuff that they get advertised to them that's completely irrelevant to their needs. Do you agree with that? Do you think that it's possible that people might be more okay at some point in the future, even if it's something like you have analytics built into your car is connected to the cloud, your car breaks down, and you start getting ads from local repair shops that can start bidding on fixing your car?
Right. It's a really big question, and I think is so many dimensions to answering it. I think people will be okay until it gets compromised. I mean, that's part of it. Is I think that we are I don't think we've hit the high water mark when it comes to cybersecurity and data breaches and things like that. And I think that to ask those people who have had their identities stolen because it's just sort of out there, or there's so many connected programs if you think about how we log into this and that cloud application using our social keys and things like that. And when those get compromised, people can backdoor into our email and then find out all sorts of good stuff that, we didn't really intend the outside world to see. I think people are getting smarter about understanding that it's tough to get the toothpaste back in the tube type of thing. Like, we're in a place where you really should understand that if you are using a service for free, nothing is free. You are paying for this with your data. And if you're getting enough value from that service, say like a Facebook, or, name your sort of favorite application or whatever, I think that you're sort of willing to, that's your currency, right? And I do think that your data is a type of currency that people will offer in order to pay for services rather than sort of offering up, their own hard-earned dollars. On the other end, it's like there is something very nefarious also going on with data as well. And I think that it's starting to make people uncomfortable when you look at, well, I mean, even in the news lately, it's like you have the great pushback from, 45 states as the federal government tries to gather voter registration.
That is fresh news.
Fresh news. And you sort of have to sit back and wonder, and there's a plethora of reasons why people don't want to do this, but I mean, and a lot of it is like they're asking for party affiliation, they're asking for the last 4 digits of Social Security. I mean, this is not stuff that you want to willingly give up, right? I mean, you have no idea what they're going to use the data for, and that's the kind of key too, is like, what is this data being used for? Is it just for research purposes, or are you going to be pumped through an advertising machine that you're not aware of to be sort of bombarded with messages? When it comes to marketing in particular and advertisers, I unfortunately sort of land on the more pessimistic sort of side of the aisle, because I think inherently, to utter the words of another mentor of mine, Mike Volpe, I think marketers are inherently lazy, and I think that they throw money at problems, and I think that it's very easy to just sort of like push a list into a program, hit the button, and just spam everybody, and how targeted that list is, and if a few people get hit with messages they weren't supposed to or didn't ask for, well, it's pretty much harass them until they either unsubscribe or they buy. And that's not a great marketing strategy. And they believe that we call it spam. And it's happening all over the place. And I think that those types of tendencies is what has led the European Union to sort of push back on sort of the data privacy acts. Do I think that the US will follow suit? I think it's just going to take us a lot longer to get there. I think that it's just we're too willing to give up our data for services today. I think some of it's invisible, which I think nobody reads the terms of services with stuff. I mean, like, it's meant not to be read. It's like, it's literally a piece of content that's like meant to be unattractive for you to read. And we don't 100% kind of understand like what's going on. But I mean, the simplest answer for your question is I do think some people will use that as currency to pay for products and services. I think there needs to be more education around what that transfer looks like and like where your data is ending up. I think that if more people knew what the end game looked like, there might be a little bit more hesitation to say, do I really need this fitness program or whatever it is that you're giving things up for? Because, and I mentioned the word nefarious because you start to think about what we could use it for. Things like healthcare and understanding like all my data, do I really want it going to my insurance company? It's like, yeah, I love my Strava app, but does my insurance company really need to be knowing about that? Well, I guess if I'm broadcasting it everywhere, then maybe, it's fair game, but you can sort of see how that becomes a very dicey argument.
Certainly.
Very quickly.
At the same time, though, if I want to share the data from my smart device, my smartwatch, or from Strava, or any other application, if I want to share that with my doctor or with some health-based service to make predictions and recommendations for my health, then that is entirely to my benefit.
100%. And that would also assume that there's some encapsulation around privacy for that, right? Like the pipe leads from, point A to point B with nothing in between. Like that's you sending that data through a secure channel to your doctor, and it's for their eyes only and not to be resold. I think that the reselling of data is something that a lot of people just don't think about, like how a lot of these companies make money. And people are like, well, how did I end up on this list? And it's like, well, you signed up for something. Like,
somebody paid for your email address.
Somebody paid for your email address, or they scraped it off the web. I mean, if you've put your email address, it's like you have a public LinkedIn profile. It's not locked down. And in your information, you have your corporate email and your personal email. Well, there's a lot of companies, data companies, that have human factories of people that literally are combing the web, just copy pasting things and building into a custom schema, the database that they put into a system, and they resell it. And that's how they collect it. I mean, data, that's like the form of like data mining. And so anytime like I get a chance to talk to, because we deal with a lot of data companies, because we're always looking at like, how can we make this a feature of our product? Is this something that, fills a gap for our customers? People think that, more data is better. That's not necessarily true. Is it the right data and all that stuff. But the key that I always ask is like, how are they mining the data? Where is it coming from? Okay, like, does this feel like shades of gray? Like how this data is being obtained? Like, is this a trustworthy source and things like that? How reliable? How much is that data refreshed as well? I mean, why LinkedIn is such a prime data source is because people want to be able to understand like when you're switching jobs and like what's a natural thing for you to do when you leave this venture and go on to another. Well, most people update their LinkedIn page, right? And that sends signals that are extraordinarily valuable to advertisers because they don't want to know Sean at Infer. They want to know Sean at, company X, and they want to be able to deliver that. And maybe there's a different offering given the company that I'm in. And now you're sort of seeing how the profile changes by like one, important life change that I made personally. And that data source is incredibly rich because most people are fairly truthful, I would want to say, on LinkedIn. I mean, I think everybody personally markets themselves, but there are hard data points that like we are self-reliant on, probably governed by our own egos, perhaps, for LinkedIn. But there's a reason that objectivity and that sort of truthfulness lives on LinkedIn. That's what makes it a very valuable data source versus something that might be, curated or made up by somebody else.
For sure. This opens a brand new window into an entirely different conversation around marketing and ethics, the ethics of marketing. And we are almost out of time, but I normally ask a question to everyone at the end about where marketing is headed, what the future of marketing is, and how we as marketers can prepare for that future, continue educating ourselves, etc. But I'd actually like to frame that question in terms of marketing ethics. With all of these ongoing and upcoming privacy concerns that consumers have, that professionals have, that corporations have, etc., with all of these upcoming privacy concerns, what do you think we as marketers can do to continue educating ourselves about those concerns and also to act responsibly as all of these things develop in the future?
I think that one of the trends that we're starting to see is I think that this is why there's a renewed interest. Well, I say renewed, and maybe it never went away, but talk of customer experience, I think, becomes very, very important. Customer-centric marketing and customer experiences. How are we sort of structuring the customer journey around this? And, are we invading their privacy? Are we too much in their face? Or are we sort of helping them with like good experiences? And I think that at the heart, that's really what a lot of marketers are after. They want to create content that you're going to read and enjoy. Unfortunately, I think that people need to sort of understand. I think there's a quality versus quantity argument. I think that too many times quantity ends up winning out, and that's where spam just becomes easier, where it's like, hey, I have this giant list of 1 million people, and if I get 0.25% of it, at least I'll have that amount of wins. That's a terrible conversion rate, but so be it. These people.
That's also the median conversion rate on AdWords.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, and a lot of these programs that I have to imagine that keeps, going down and down. I also think that marketers need to also start thinking about the fact that people have more power to shut you off more than ever right now. They have the ability to block your advertising with ad blockers. They have the ability to delete their cookies and go incognito and sort of help not have you track them around and things like that. I think that part of it we have to check, like, how much do we want to forcibly opt in? And if we do opt them into our programs, like, how much value are we actually creating? And I think that part of that is by evaluating that experience. I think that the other thing too is moving towards that sort of more quality argument is, I think, something that's actually going to probably change the way that we build marketing teams in the future. I'm a big believer that smaller teams can do big things. I think that the marketing executive who's the empire builder that, builds these lumbering marketing departments that are very slow moving, like not agile, and can do great things, ends up being very budget heavy. And I think that they start to lose some of the creativity as well. That last word, by the way, is something that's very deep and meaningful to me, because especially as we've talked about, automation and AI and a lot of these programs, I really want marketers to understand sort of, not to get too meta, but like think about what is the soul of what they're doing right now. I don't want technology and adoption of technology to create soulless marketing. And I think that you see it a lot out there where stuff is anybody can put words to a page. In fact, with, deep learning and neural networks, like we'll get to the point where you could probably create a half decent readable blog post right now with just a machine and a few inputs. They won't be able to replace us podcasters quite yet. We still have time.
Not yet.
We still have
I still have a job.
We still have time. We still have time. But like, if it's just another piece of content you could throw on the pile, like, was that worth doing when you could have spent more time and maybe a little bit more effort to create something that somebody would truly enjoy? And I think that's putting more soul back into it. And I think that the same thing is with automation. It's like the ability for AI to sort of be able to streamline through small, tedious tasks, I don't think is ever going to change. I think that's going to continue into many other verticals that we're seeing beyond sales and marketing. But I still want creativity to be the main differentiation here. And I think that no matter what your role is in a marketing team or even in an organization, whether you're a startup or a long-standing company, I think that there's always going to be a great point of differentiation for people who are willing to sort of be creative and sort of move beyond just like the different types of buttons that they can push. And I think that's going to be hugely important.
Awesome. Well, Sean, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot, and I think I can speak for the rest of us listening that this has been really, really cool. So once again, thank you so much for inviting me here to your office here in Mountain View. That's where we are right now, right?
Yeah, you nailed it.
So thank you so much for inviting me down here. It's been a real pleasure connecting with you. You're also the co-host of your own podcast, Stack and Flow.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Please provide a shameless plug.
Yeah, it's stackandflow.io. I do the show with my co-host and producer, John Wall. People might know him from marketingovercoffee.com. I've known John forever since he first started on the scene with podcasting. And it's been a lot of fun. And it's been a pleasant surprise as well. I didn't know how enthusiastic people were going to be about the show. And to be honest, like one listener was going to be like a big, a big success.
I hear you.
Us.
Yeah.
But it's been a wonderful channel. It's been a great educational device for me. Because like one of the things that it's really helped me is be a better interviewer, which if you're a communications professional, it's all about practice. That's your bicep curl, right? Like that's the exercise that you want to just keep doing. And I get a chance to do that with John week after week. And with some just, from members of the Infer family to some of the people that I really, really admire. And it's a great excuse to talk to them and improve those skills. And I love any feedback that people have. We're bringing in a lot of new topics beyond sales and marketing, starting to look at things that are happening in supply chain and really exciting integrations between sales and marketing and supply chain and what that looks like. So we're really starting to broaden the conversation. So check it out, leave us a review, and let me know what you think.
Awesome. Well, John, once again, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for having me here in your office, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun.
I think you see what I mean when I said in the very beginning of this episode how awesome Sean is and how much expertise he has around everything that we talked about. Really enjoyed that little bit about marketing ethics at the very end. I think that we're going to see some very interesting conversations around that topic in the coming future. As always, the show notes and a transcript of this episode is available on our website at instapage.com/podcast. You are more than welcome to. In fact, I would love if you checked out the rest of the resources. We've got a killer blog, amazing videos, and of course we have the most powerful landing page platform for teams and agencies. So come check us out. Say hello to us while you're there as well. My name is Ander. My email address, you're more than welcome to reach out to. It is Ander, A-N-D-E-R, @instapage.com. And you can say hello to the rest of our team as well on social media. All right, my fellow marketers, I am out for now. My name is Ander, and this is Advertising Influencers. Cheers to your future success, and cheers to better marketing. I will talk to you soon.
Advertising Influencers. Conversations with today's top-tier marketers from Silicon Valley and beyond. Powered by Instapage, the most powerful landing page solution.